Welcome back. Let's talk turkey. In this episode, I'm going to cover the concept of funding your ECRM program. Among others, John McCain is attributed with saying, "Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value." As we approach the subject of funding, I want to come at it from three different angles. Number one, along the lines of something you can do starting today to stop the cyber bleeding, I will make two suggestions that are process changes that I think are relatively easy to undertake. Number two, we'll talk about this concept of ECRM debt and how you might find additional sources of funding that you hadn't considered before as a way to help you address all the debt that's been accrued over the last 10 years or so. And last but not least, number three, whatever funding that you have, be it large or small, how do you make intelligent, informed, optimal decisions about where you're going to spend that money? So let's get started. As always, before we dive in, let's provide a quick reminder of where we are today. This is episode number 22. I will record a total of 30 episodes, including the introduction and the epilogue. All of the episodes will be posted to this YouTube channel. If you've not already done so, please consider subscribing to the channel. You may also provide feedback at any point along the way, including at the end of each episode. If you like what you hear, please provide a thumbs up. And last but not least, if you have any friends or colleagues whom you believe may benefit from this material, feel free to share the YouTube channel and link with them. So let's begin. Starting today, as I've labeled this slide, if you're not familiar with NIST Special Publication 800-37 Rev 2, I would encourage you to review it. In a nutshell, it's all about security by design. I've extracted a couple of concepts from this document. I want to draw your attention to a technique to help stop the cyber bleeding, something that we can embed in our product or systems development life cycles. And they're known as authorization to operate or authorization to use, which comes into play typically in an outsourced situation or cloud services, something along those lines. Take a look at authorization to operate. It reads, the official management decision given by a senior federal official or officials to authorize the operation of an information system, and I've highlighted to explicitly accept the risk. Now, NIST is applicable to and must be followed by government agencies. Commercial agencies can use this as a guideline. So when you see senior federal official or officials, swap that out and place their senior executive in your organization. So what I'm suggesting to you is the following. Do not deploy any new data solutions, systems, or devices without a business leader in your organization accepting the risk associated with that particular initiative or project or program. Of course, that means some business leader in your organization needs to understand their risk register as it relates to this initiative, state their risk appetite, and go through the processes that we've undertaken and discussed so far. If you want to stop the cyber bleeding, consider making authorization to operate part of your system development lifecycle. Secondarily, let's talk about another technique that you can implement today. Let me begin with a quote from Jamie Dimon, who's the chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He made it in his April 2019 letter to shareholders. I have written in previous letters about the enormous effort and resources we dedicate to protect ourselves and our clients. We spend nearly $600 million a year on these efforts and have more than 3,000 employees deployed to this mission in some way. Now here comes the important part. Indirectly, we also spend a lot of time and effort trying to protect our company in different ways as part of the ordinary course of running the business. That's where we need to move. We need to make enterprise cyber risk management part of the ordinary course of running business. The best way to ensure that you don't incur additional ECRM debt going forward, and that you can put in place to help stop the cyber bleeding today is to withhold approval of any initiatives, projects, or programs involving healthcare data, systems, or devices unless or until specific and appropriate funding has been designated for cyber risk management. I'm reminded of a discussion with a CIO of a mid-sized health system I had several years ago. Classic health system, dozen or so hospitals, ambulatory surgery centers, dozens of clinics, long-term care facilities, home health care, etc., etc. He proudly announces to me that he is now responsible for managing a $50 million Cerner implementation project. And I said to him, how much has been allocated for enterprise cyber risk management? It was a true deer in the headlights moment. And the answer, after a pause, was, well, nothing. And so here's the point. To stop the cyber bleeding, as another technique, we must stop careless project launches. Do not let them go forward until or unless there's consideration of what needs to be done from an ECRM point of view so that we can properly implement reasonable and appropriate controls to protect the data systems and devices. It's everything we've been talking about so far. So that's starting today, number 2. Let's consider the concept of ECRM debt. Remember, in a nutshell, as a result of the blitzkrieg of implementation of data solutions, systems, and devices over the course of the last decade or so, many organizations find themselves today playing enormous catch-up, having lots to do and lots to spend to cover the absence of appropriate consideration of enterprise cyber risk management up to this point. So if you want to think about jump-starting your program and ways to fund covering ECRM debt, consider these 3 sources of funding that I've shown here. Number 1, what if you could lower your cost of capital? That is the amount of interest you pay to borrow. All the major credit rating agencies are including cyber risk when assessing credit ratings today. And by the way, as a sidebar, as a result of the mega breach that Equifax had several years ago, their credit rating was lowered. Second one, what if you could lower your premium costs for your executive risk and liability insurance portfolio? Large health systems are doing exactly that. And they're starting by building a direct relationship with their executive risk broker, with their underlying carriers, and their executive team. And among other things, they're undertaking a review of gaps and clashes and redundancies that may exist within existing policies. Last but not least, have you considered a grant from your captive insurance company? Most large integrated delivery networks, health systems have their own captive, a form of self-insurance. If you've not already done so, consider getting a grant from your captive to complete OCR quality risk analyses. CRICO, a captive insurance company that covers all the professionals and all the hospitals in the Harvard system, did exactly that several years ago to get an accurate baseline among its participating hospitals. The good news, if you receive a grant from your captive, it doesn't hit your P&L, it doesn't hit your balance sheet in any negative way. And it's a good way to jumpstart your program. And by the way, what's not on this slide, but I suggest you perhaps have a conversation with a CFO about, is what happened to all the electronic health record incentive money? Where did that go? Unfortunately, per the example I gave a moment ago about my CIO friend, not a lot of it was spent, if any, on enterprise cyber risk management. Maybe those funds are around somewhere and you may be able to access them. One last point on funding your ECRM program. Let's suppose you're a newly appointed CISO, and like Barney Fife, you've only been handed one bullet, or maybe you've been handed several bullets. It doesn't matter whether you have lots of resources or limited resources. A key question boils down to, how do you decide how to spend your ECRM budget? If the answer is not obvious, given the choices I've listed here, I've done a really poor job up to this point in this series. While yes, pen testing vulnerability scans are important and can be part of risk analysis work, I'd really avoid wasting time on control checklists and certifications. The answer here is quite clear. The only way to make informed, optimal decisions about how to manage your unique risk is through OCR quality risk analysis and risk management. What I covered in this episode was the concept of ECRM funding. We talked about 3 particular aspects of that. As in all cases, I'm ending the session with some suggested actions as well as a compendium of references and resources. I encourage you, while the materials are still somewhat fresh in your mind, to consider undertaking some of the actions and review some of the materials that I've provided. In the next episode, I will discuss ECRM principles that your board and executives should consider adopting. These are based on some terrific work done by the National Association of Corporate Directors. Until then, please provide a thumbs up to this episode if you enjoyed the content. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you've not already done so. Be well, be secure, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.